My boss fired me for being too good. You won't believe what happened at 3 a.m. The clock struck 3, a heavy silence blanketed the office. Shadows flitted across the walls like whispering ghosts, flickering under the dying fluorescent lights. It was supposed to be just another mundane night shift, yet something felt deeply off. Jim had just been handed his termination letter, his jaw clenched tight, disbelief pooling in his chest. Fired for being too good? It was a line so outrageous he almost laughed. But deep down, tightening in his gut, he knew there was more to this mystery. Earlier that night, his boss, Mr. Harrington, had looked at him with an intensity that made Jim's skin crawl. That wasn't a friendly gaze, it was predatory. There was something unsettling about the way Mr. Harrington had tapped his finger against the desk, like a heartbeat ticking down to something dreadful. "You know too much," he had whispered. The word slithered into Jim's mind, a chilling warning that sent shivers down his spine. What did he mean by that? It resonated with a sense of urgency pounding in Jim's ears. He had always excelled at his job, never backing down from a challenge, but what he had stumbled upon during his diligent hours of work was something much darker. The files marked "Top Secret" had beckoned to him, revealing secrets so brazenly hidden behind a corporate facade that they had made his stomach turn. Names. Deals. Things that shouldn't exist in a place like this. Just then, the sudden blast of a printer burst into life, breaking the eerie silence. Jim jumped, heart racing, pulse hammering like a drum. No one else was there to hear it, or so he thought. The papers came spilling out, leaving snippets of information scattered like breadcrumbs. He leaned down, eyes wide. It was a list of employees, all of whom had vanished without a trace. An involuntary gasp escaped his lips. Where had they gone? What kind of corporation was he tangled up in? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. Panic clutched at Jim's throat, leaving him breathless. He shoved the papers into his bag, but the whisper in the office didn't die down. Someone was watching him. He could feel their eyes on the back of his neck. He spun around but found nothing, just that disquieting stillness. Was it paranoia or something more sinister? The night stretched on, thickening the air, pressing down on his chest. As he headed for the door, a strange noise echoed from the storage room at the far end of the office. A low creak followed by a single, haunting laugh. His breath hitched. Was it a trick of the mind? Was someone really in there? Jim's body moved on its own. He found himself gravitating towards that ominous sound. As he neared, the chill clawed up his spine, anticipation and dread locking him in place. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning him closer. What would he find in that shadowy room? A clue to unravel the terrifying secrecy surrounding his workplace? Or something much worse? The door creaked open with a raspy groan, revealing a dim void that sent a chill racing through Jim's core. He hesitated, heart thudding aggressively against his ribs, every fiber of his being screaming to retreat. But curiosity pulled him like gravity. What if he could uncover the truth? What if there were answers to the horrific questions that churned in his mind? Squaring his shoulders, Jim peered inside. The cold embraced him like an unwelcome specter. Boxes lay stacked haphazardly, some toppled over like the bodies of the vanished employees. Dust motes danced in a thin beam of light that spilled through the open door, illuminating the unmistakable shadows. Then he heard it again, a laugh. This time, it was closer, almost mocking. The blood drained from his face, his instincts screamed to run, yet his curiosity won the battle. He stepped further into the darkness, the hard floor cold beneath his feet. Hello. He whispered, more of a plea than an inquiry. Silence responded, the kind that weighed heavy and thick. It soaked up sound, leaving only his heartbeat reverberating like a war drum. He took another step, then another, until the dimness began to envelop him fully. Something about the storage room felt alive, vibrating with a sinister energy, like a coiled spring ready to snap. Suddenly, an object caught his eye, a glass panel scattered on the floor. Curiosity lured him closer. Among the shards, he noticed something jutting out. It was a simple badge, a company ID. But it wasn't just any ID. It belonged to Rose, one of the employees listed in the mysterious documents. His heart raced. What had happened to her? He picked up the badge, noticing the name still readable, Rose Thompson. The laughter echoed again, sharper this time and filled with an unsettling glee. Jim darted his gaze, scanning the room for the source, but all that surrounded him was darkness. Then a rustle broke the stillness. His spine stiffened, and he turned abruptly, bracing himself. From the depths of the shadows, a figure emerged, silhouetted and monstrous. It stepped into the flickering light, a face obscured by a mask made of twisted metal, sunken eyes gleaming with malice. "Jim," it hissed, voice dripping with mockery. "You really shouldn't have come here." Panic surged through his veins. The imperceptible aura from the figure was suffocating, frozen breath frosting in the air. "What do you want?" Jim stammered, adrenaline sending his heart into overdrive. "Too good to be true, isn't it?" The masked figure laughed, referential of the words that had seared into his mind. "You know too much, just like the others." Jim's stomach twisted at the insinuation. "What did you do to them?" With a twisted grin, the figure stepped closer, and the temperature dropped further. "What did you think they found in the files?" "Secrets buried deep in the corporate graveyard, secrets that cost people their lives." The truth clanged like a bell inside Jim's skull. He needed to escape. With a sudden burst of determination, he whirled around and bolted toward the door. But the figure lunged, grabbing the back of his collar and yanking him back. "You're not leaving that easily," it growled, voice low and gravelly. "The night's just beginning." Gasping, Jim struggled, adrenaline coursing through him, but the grip was solid. He was trapped, heart racing, mind whirling. Would he face the same vanishing fate as Rose and the others? In the struggle, a sharp edge from a shattered piece of glass glinted in Jim's peripheral vision. Desperation ignited. In a swift motion, he twisted, thrusting his elbow back into the figure's side, feeling flesh give way. It staggered, releasing him for just a second. He dove through the doorframe, tumbling into the hallway, gasping for the breath that had been stolen. But what lay ahead was an unforeseen terror. The lights flickered sporadically, illuminating figures scattering through the office, a phantasm of the missing employees, faces distorted with agony and desperation. Their gazes locked onto Jim, pleading for his help, while shadows danced menacingly around them. What had he stumbled into? And more importantly, could he uncover the truth and escape with his life? "Come back," the familiar voice of Mrs. Keller, his old colleague, echoed in the distance, trailing off into the night. "We need you." Jim felt the weight settle on his shoulders. He couldn't leave them. Not now. With every heartbeat pounding louder than before, he steeled his resolve. He had to return, but how? The flickering lights brushed against Jim's face, casting long shadows that warped the truth, turning the familiar office into a dark carnival of horrors. He felt the urge to bolt again, but the desperation on the twisted faces around him held him in place. Their eyes, wide and haunted, were a silent scream for rescue. "Jim! You can help us." Mrs. Keller's voice sounded more insistent now, cutting through the chilling air. He turned to find her figure at the front of the horde, her expression a mix of fear and something else, hope. "You were always the one who could make sense of the chaos." "Mrs. Keller, what has happened? Where are the others?" Fear gripped him, but concern overrode the panic. "You have to come back," she urged, gesturing weakly toward the darkness where she had come from, as if it held the answers. We can't leave until we confront him. The entity trapped us here. It feasts on our fear, our despair. You can save us, but only if you're willing to face it. It felt like an electric current pulsed through the air, alive with the tension of impending danger. Jim took a step forward, muscles tightening with a mix of dread and determination. He thought of Rose, of all the others who had vanished without a trace, lost to the oppressive weight of secrets and darkness. I can't let them be lost like this. I need to help. Yes. But follow my lead, Jim. Together, we can force him out into the light. Her words were barely a whisper, the darkness pressing in on them like a vice. Jim's heart raced as a feeling of camaraderie washed over him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were merely prey in a vast hunting ground. What if we don't make it? He asked, voice trembling slightly. What if we go back and it's worse? The figures around him stirred, their eyes locking onto Jim, full of longing. The weight of responsibility pressed down as he realized this was more than a gruesome adventure, it was soul versus soul. Survival against the unseen. They were begging him, imploring him to take one step out of the darkness. Listen, Mrs. Keller spoke gently, if the truth is buried, we must unearth it. Whatever it is that binds us to this place lies behind that door. She pointed back toward the storage room where their terror had materialized. We must confront it together. With renewed determination, Jim nodded. He wouldn't surrender to fear, nor would he let the shadows win. I'm in. But we have to be careful. A collective murmur of agreement resonated through the ghostly assembly, their desperate hope igniting a spark within him. He stepped back into the room, forcing himself to face the lurking darkness. Shadows twisted at the corners like angry serpents, glaring at Jim with a hunger he felt deep in his bones. The figure, the masked tormentor, stood waiting beyond the shards of glass, its head cocked as if judging Jim's resolve. You think you can save them? How noble, it sneered, voice thick with disdain. But no one escapes this fate. They are mine. What have you done to them? Jim shouted, grasping onto the flickering remnants of courage. The figure leaned in closer, its eyes glinting with madness. Their souls are tethered to this place by their own fears. You'll join them soon enough. But first let us play. Suddenly, the shadows surged, merging into a swirling vortex around Jim and the others, their forms flickering and fading in and out of reality. The laughter returned, echoing like an unseen ghost, and shadows pressed in, circling tighter. Face your fear, Jim. It's the only way to break free. Mrs. Keller cried out, her voice strained as she reached out, her hand brushing against his. But just as he reached for her, a sharp pain coursed through him, one of those files he had read yanked at the edges of his mind, a memory pushing to surface. Wait. I've seen this before. Life blurred and shifted. Questions swirled faster than answers, generating chaos deeper than he ever imagined. The masked figure's laughter rang clear, drowning out his thoughts. Jim leaned into the pain, searching for clarity in the madness. There had to be a link, a secret buried in the files. But what truth awaited him in the deep caverns of his memories? Could he unearth it before the darkness consumed everything? All he knew was the laughter wouldn't stop. And they were counting on him to find a way out before it was too late. The shadows twisted into grotesque shapes, stretching like limbs across the walls, reaching for Jim with an insatiable hunger. Every heartbeat thundered in his ears as chaos escalated. The laughter echoed louder, a maddening cacophony that toyed with his sanity. He felt the desperation of the trapped souls surround him, their whispers blending into an urgent plea. Jim! Someone cried, a voice lost within the howl of terror. He glanced at Mrs. Keller, whose face was taut with fear. Her wide eyes locked onto his, and in that moment, he realized they were not just hunting for answers, they were fighting for survival. What do I need to do? He shouted, trying to pierce through the turmoil. The darkness warped around him, taunting him with visions of despair. Shadows sliced through his thoughts, and he knew he had to break the cycle. Remember the files. She urged, her voice rising above the clamor. You've seen it before. There's a connection. Find it. Jim felt the weight of the memory pressing down. A file jammed in his mind, the ink blotting out everything but a single, damning word, fear. The masked figure grinned, sensing Jim's realization. Yes, fear is the key. But it will also be your doom. With a flash, visions from the past invaded his mind. He remembered each victim's face lighting up the pages, victims who had come to him for help, their fears laid bare in those documents. Each name carved into his memory like a brand, each story a thread in a tangled web. The entity had been feeding off their fears for years. What if we embrace it? Jim blurted out, his voice shaky but steadying. What if we confront our fears, expose them for what they are? The shadows paused, a stillness lingering in the air. The figure's expression faltered slightly, shadows rippling like a disturbed surface. You think you can overpower me with mere thoughts? You are naive, it hissed, but there was a certain hesitance there, a shift in the air. Jim stepped closer to the core of darkness. No, not just thoughts, he replied, gathering courage. All those people, they trusted me. I can't let you keep them. I'm stronger together with them. The darkness coiled tighter, venomous and threatening. You don't understand the depths of their fear. They're trapped by it. Another pulse of pain shot through Jim, memories blurring into reality. He saw Rose's face, her laughter now an echo, her life snuffed out by the entity's malevolence. I won't lose another person. He shouted, his voice finally connecting with the resolve inside him. He extended his hand toward Mrs. Keller, drawing forth the strength radiating from the assembly of lost souls. We face this together. Let go of your fear. Let it set you free. His voice rang out, and with it, the shadows around them momentarily recoiled. Mrs. Keller met his gaze, a shared understanding sparking between them. Together. Let us confront it. She shouted, and the others surged forward, hands clasped and faces alight with a newfound defiance. At that moment, the room shook violently. The shadows roared with fury, but the collective force of their combined resolve pulsed back, like a shockwave against the dark tide. The masked figure snarled, clearly rattled, but its resolve deepened, fiercely insistent. You cannot escape this game. Jim felt the floor tremble beneath him as the shadows converged, swirling faster, testing their combined strength. The screams of onlookers roared through the air, drowning out everything else. Yet there, in that tumultuous chaos, Jim felt a glimmer. Something was shifting. Press on. We can't stop now. He yelled to those around him as fear wrestled with hope, uncertainty clashing with resolve. But just as the darkness began to recoil, an ominous wind swept through the chamber, and Jim's heart dropped. Would their courage be enough to break through? Or would the darkness swallow them all whole? As the whirlwind intensified, a chilling whisper hung in the air, playful yet foreboding, welcome to the next level of the game. Jim felt his heart drop. Was this the beginning of their liberation or a descent into a horrifying reckoning? Jim's world shifted as the darkness surged like a tidal wave, relentless and unforgiving. The shadowy figure, twisting and contorting, swept menacingly toward them with an energy that oozed threat. A pungent fear lay thick in the air, palpable and suffocating. His heart raced as the voices of the trapped souls echoed around him, blending into a dreadful symphony of despair and fury. Together. Mrs. Keller shouted, her resolve igniting a flicker of hope. Jim felt it, their strength united. Every soul intertwined with their fears, surging against the will of the entity. Yet, uncertainty lingered at the edges of hope. The wind howled, the whispers grew louder, rising into a furious crescendo. You cannot withstand my power. The figure shrieked, its voice twisted and echoing like thunder, rattling the bones of those present. Jim could see the fear in the eyes of those gathered. But beneath it all, there was a spark, their shared determination. Embrace it. Jim bellowed, the words spilling forth in a rush. Let your fears be your strength. Together, We'll make it break. The shadows shrieked and tightened their grip. Each scream clawed at Jim's mind, flashing visions of terror he felt nearly drowned in memories of the fallen. Each person had entrusted him with their vulnerabilities, their deepest nightmares. This wasn't just a confrontation, it was a fight for lives, for memories that couldn't be lost. Mrs. Keller stepped closer, her face resolute amidst the chaos. We can't let it win. We won't be its food anymore. Their hands clasped, each person sending a pulse of energy toward the heart of the darkness. For a moment, Jim felt an incredible weight shift, as if the burdens they carried broke open just enough to allow something new to shine through. Light? Was it light? Foolish. The entity shrieked, claws snapping around them, trying to sink in its talons of despair. You think you can escape the power of fear? You will face it in full. Darkness exploded around them, sending them reeling, crashing against the walls of the chamber. Jim gasped, winded, the air heavy with the stench of dread. Scrambling back to his feet, he spotted Mrs. Keller. She was down but pushing upward, determination radiating from her despite the shadows clawing at her clothes. Get up! Jim shouted, heart hammering in his chest. They depend on us. We need to hold on. With gritted teeth, they rose, straightening their backs against the gale of despair. One by one, the others staggered to their feet, the collective will growing stronger. Look deep within. Jim called, feeling the energy of the group surge around him. Face your fears. Let them loose. For a moment, silence reigned, a calm before the storm. Then, one by one, they began to speak, each voice rising above the howls of the shadows, confessions spilling like water breaking a dam. I'm afraid of losing control. I fear never being enough. I can't bear to face my past. The air pulsed with energy as the shadows writhed, twisting and turning in agony against the onslaught of raw truth. The masked figure howled, its visage flickering like a flame about to extinguish. You are foolish. This hope will be your undoing. Suddenly, the ground shook violently, and cracks began to splinter across the floor, threatening to swallow them whole. Panic enveloped them, but the flame of determination flared brighter. They held on tighter, focused on the fire within. Keep going. Mrs. Keller shouted. We have to push past the fear. But just then, the darkness roared back with a terrible force, sending a wave of shadow towards them, cascading as if the very essence of despair sought to consume everything in its path. Are you ready to face your end? The entity hissed, its power swelling. Jim's heart raced, wondering if that was truly the precipice of their demise or a gateway to freedom. As the shadows closed in, something flickered in the corner of the room, an object faintly glowing, pulsing with a strange light. What was it? Could that hold the key to their salvation? Time froze as they felt the looming darkness tighten around them. Would they seize this thread of hope before it slipped away forever? The shadows loomed closer, their cold tendrils brushing against Jim's skin, sending shivers crawling down his spine. He felt the weight of despair pressing in on him, a heavy fog that threatened to drown any flicker of hope. But then, there it was again, the glowing object. It pulsed like a heartbeat, offering a beacon of light in the sea of darkness. Over there! Jim shouted, pointing frantically. The tiny glimmer might be their salvation, a spark born from their collective courage. We have to reach it. Mrs. Keller was the first to respond, her voice rising above the chaotic moans of the shadows. We can get through. Together. Push. They surged forward, every ounce of will they had pooling into their feet, driving them toward the light. Jim could feel the warmth radiating from the glow, a stark contrast to the chill of despair threatening to suffocate them. But the darkness wasn't done yet. It lashed back with a force so fierce, it pushed them backward like a gust of wind, shoving them away from their destination. Hold on! Jim yelled. This relentless pull of darkness wouldn't take them without a fight. Don't let it tear us apart. Fingers clenched together tighter. He could hear the ragged breaths of his companions, the determination mixed with the palpable fear that swirled around them. One of the group members faltered, but Mrs. Keller steadied them with an encouraging glance. "Look at the light. It's within reach." With every step, the glowing object seemed to pulse harder, as if it recognized the desperate spirit of the soul striving to break free. Jim felt a spark rising within him, igniting the flames of every fear he had ever faced. "We've come too far to turn back now." But the entity was relentless. It clawed at them, shrieks echoing of his most haunting memories. "You think your light will save you? You're nothing but fragments of despair." A surge of darkness erupted from its core, swallowing the room in a tangible shadow thicker than any night he had known. The cries of the trapped souls spiraled with the shadows, and Jim fought against it with everything he had. Then, in the center of the chaos, the glowing object flared brilliantly, illuminating the room in a cascade of soft white light. Jim's heart skipped with something approaching clarity. He recognized it, an amulet, the same kind the villagers whispered about, said to hold the power of unity and truth. "Reach for it," he commanded, feeling his spirit lift. "It's our chance." With each member focusing on the light, he sensed something shift within the room. The darkness hesitated, shadows jittering as they recoiled from the glow. Having cleaved through their fears and weaknesses, Jim saw their power begin to swell. "Now!" Mrs. Keller shouted, and they all extended their hands toward the amulet as if drawing it into their collective resolve. The light brightened, growing to a blinding intensity that forced the shadows around them to quiver and shake, but before they could seize it, another shockwave erupted. The entity screamed, its form rippling and splitting as if unsure of how to respond to the light. "Foolish mortals! You'll regret this fight." Suddenly, a fissure opened in the dark expanse just behind the amulet, a yawning chasm that threatened to swallow everything. Jim felt the ground quaking beneath his feet, the air thickening with a suffocating sense of dread. "We have to," and then, with one final deafening roar, the darkness exploded outward. Jim was thrown back, tumbling through the air as a blinding light engulfed the chamber. He caught glimpses of terrified faces that soon transformed into expressions of awe. But the last thing he saw before the darkness consumed him completely was Mrs. Keller reaching for him, her eyes fierce with determination. What would happen when the dust settled? Would they conquer the shadows or be lost within them forever? The echo of her voice was distant, like a fading hymn. "Don't give in, Jim." Then everything went dark. As Jim lost consciousness, he couldn't shake the feeling that the battle was far from over. What awaited them on the other side? When Jim finally opened his eyes, he found himself sprawled on a hard surface. Everything around him was hazy. It took a moment for his surroundings to sharpen into focus, the dim light flickering like a dying star above. He could see the outlines of his companions lying nearby, all in various states of awareness. Panic surged in him. "Mrs. Keller!" he called, voice hoarse, panic cracking through it. A faint groan emerged from her direction, and Jim scrambled to his feet. The ground felt unsteady beneath him, shaking as if still being pulled apart by that monstrous fissure. He steadied himself, reaching out to grab one of the nearby pillars to keep from tumbling over. "Jim! Is that you?" Her voice was strained, but he could hear determination beneath it. "Yeah, over here." He hurried to her side, where she was propped against the wall, bruises blooming across her skin. "Are you okay?" She nodded slowly, but her eyes were wide, panic lurking beneath her calm facade. "What happened? Where are we?" Glancing around, Jim saw it. They weren't in the same chamber anymore. Instead, they stood in a vast expanse that looked like a distorted version of their world, a warped reflection of the village. The air crackled with uncertainty, and shadows flitted in the corners of his vision, taunting him. "Whatever that thing was, it must have thrown us somewhere else," he said, dread weighing heavily on each word. The others began to stir, one by one. A murmur of confusion swept along the group, vulnerability hanging in the air. "That was one hell of a ride," muttered Marcus, fighting to stand. We have to find a way back. We can't let it win. Jim said, rallying the others, but deep down, he felt the weight of doubt. Then they all turned to see what had once been the glowing amulet, a mere fragment now, its light flickering weakly, hanging just within reach on a pedestal. Jim felt his heart lurch. This wasn't just a remnant, it was their last hope. Get it! Yelled Mrs. Keller, steel returning to her voice. Just as they made their way forward, the atmosphere grew stifling. A low growl reverberated through the air, pulsating with darkness. From the shadows emerged grotesque forms, twisted figures writhing and clawing. The shadows were alive, creeping closer with every heartbeat, echoing with malign laughter that burrowed into Jim's mind. No! We won't let you take us! Shouted Petey, rushing forward, but as he did, one of the shadows lunged, clawing at him. The connection severed with a scream that sent a streak of ice through Jim's veins. Petey! But Mrs. Keller grabbed Jim's arm as he prepared to dash towards their friend. No! We have to get the amulet first. It's our only chance. It felt wrong to leave someone behind. A desperate rage burned in Jim's chest. We can't abandon him. Then we all lose. Focus. The figures hesitated, as if sensing the turmoil within him. The laughter twisted, carrying a note of glee, as if the shadows relished the internal conflict that played across Jim's face. Jim gritted his teeth, pushing every fear and hesitation aside. We'll get him back. But first, the amulet. With grim determination, they rushed toward the pedestal. The shadows shrieked in indignation, spilling closer, hands reaching toward them with desperate hunger. Tension crackled in the air as Jim reached for the amulet. It shimmered, responding to his touch, but the darkness fought back, tightening around them like a vice. Would they really summon enough courage to overcome this malevolent force? And then, just as he grasped it in his hands, a startling voice echoed from somewhere deep within the shadows, "You think you can save them? Let us see how far you're willing to go." As the shadows laughed, Jim felt a new wave of doubt thrusting into his heart. What terrible choice lay ahead for him? Would he have to risk everything to save his friend? The amulet pulsed in Jim's hand, its warmth seeping into his skin, a brief comfort amidst the chaos surrounding them. He felt the darkness squeeze tighter, clawing at his resolve. We've got it. Now what? He shouted over the cacophony of wails. Use it! Yelled Mrs. Keller, her eyes fierce and unwavering. Whatever it takes. Heart racing, Jim took a step forward, feeling a surge of energy pulse through him. But what if it backfires? We don't know how this thing works. Panic danced in his chest as he looked around. Marcus and the others were quickly falling back, their faces haunted by fear. Better to try than to lose everything, she urged, her voice cutting through the dread. He took a deep breath, forcing the words from his throat. Then I'll do it. I'll make a choice. The shadows flickered, their hungry forms writhing as they drew closer, smelling fear and desperation. With a firm grip on the amulet, Jim closed his eyes, focusing hard on their connection, the bond they shared as friends. The memory of laughter, stolen moments, and Petey's fierce loyalty crystallized in his mind. The shadows hissed, recoiling at his intent. Get ready! He shouted, feeling the heat radiate from the amulet like a beacon of hope, lighting up the forsaken space around them. Then the ground shook violently beneath his feet, sending shockwaves through his body. The shadows screamed, their unwelcome presence blaring in an orchestra of agony as they surged toward him. With a burst of will, Jim raised the amulet, feeling it surge with power. Light exploded from the artifact, illuminating the darkness and casting elongated shadows against the warped walls. The figures writhed, twisting away from the brightness, fierce howls shrieking out of them, echoing the torment they felt. We can't hold this. Marcus gasped, struggling against the wave of darkness trying to pull him back. It's too much. Focus on hope. Jim shouted, urging everyone to ground themselves in thought. Think of why we're fighting. As he fueled the amulet with their collective strength, the shadows writhed, retreating into forgotten corners. But just as Jim began to sense victory, a dreadful chill swept through the air. A voice thundered from the dark recesses, deeper and more menacing than before. "Foolish children! You think you can disrupt my domain?" A figure stepped out from the murk, a towering specter, its eyes glowing with a sickly luminescence. The laughter that followed chilled Jim's bones as it swept over them, mocking and victorious. "You will pay dearly for your disobedience," it said, voice dripping with malice. "You think you can hold back your fears? This isn't just my realm, this is your mind. This is your nightmare." Jim's heart raced. Could it be true? Had they unwittingly fallen into their own selves, where the greatest fears lurked? But he couldn't think like that. "We're stronger together," he yelled, uncertainty gnawing at him. "Strength means nothing when faced with despair," the figure sneered, and just like that, shadows surged forth again, pulling at their feet. Suddenly, darkness erupted around them, and the amulet's glow dimmed, flickering against the unyielding gloom. Panic shot through him as fear strangled hope. "We're losing it!" Mrs. Keller cried out. "Jim, focus. Remember what you love. Don't let it win." But as the shadows swept closer, Jim began to feel the weight of his choices pressing down, turning familiar faces into twisted echoes of their true selves. Would he stand and fight in the face of unbearable loss? He squeezed the amulet harder, lungs burning, mind racing. In that instant, something sparked within him, an idea that pulsed stronger than fear. As darkness wrapped around his throat, he prepared for the last stand. It was now or never. He could either embrace the nightmare or fight. He just wasn't sure which would actually set them free. And as the shadows rushed him, a vivid image bloomed in his mind, Petey, laughing, hands open, waiting for him. "I'm coming for you." But would love be enough to conquer the darkness? It was a gamble that could cost him everything. The shadows lunged, a writhing mass that sought to consume everything Jim cared about. With every ounce of strength, he pressed the amulet against his chest, visualizing Petey's face, pure joy and unconditional love. The memories channeled through him like a raging river, drowning out the whispers of doubt. "Come on, come on!" Jim roared, struggling against the weight of encroaching fears. The amulet pulsed fiercely, its glow flickering like a candle in a storm, fighting against the engulfing darkness. Then, without warning, the specter lunged forward, its maw gaping wide, shadows pouring forth like molten tar. "You are nothing, boy. You are just a flicker against the night." It bellowed, the very air thickening with bitterness. "No." Suddenly clear-headed amidst the chaos, Jim shouted back, "I have love. I have friends." He thrust the amulet forward, channeling his very essence into it, and light exploded from the gem, a surge of fierce radiance that seared through the darkness, piercing the very core of the malevolent figure standing before him. The specter's form shimmered, unstable under the blaze, revealing tortured faces stitched together in anguish. "You think light can kill what lives in the dark?" It snarled, yet its voice was strained, weakened by Jim's defiance. "Watch me!" Jim cried, heart pounding like a drum in his chest. He felt the tendrils of the darkness trying to ensnare him, creeping around him like a noose. It wanted him so badly. But now, with the amulet's light surging, the shadows recoiled, twisting back, writhing with anger. "Focus on us!" Mrs. Keller yelled, her voice a rallying cry. "We can fight this together." He glanced back at his friends Marcus, Sarah, and the rest, faces filled with determination. They needed him. He couldn't falter now. "Think of the people you love," he shouted, infusing the air with their collective strength, feeding the amulet light. As the brightness expanded, Jim felt a surge of energy flood into him. The darkness hissed angrily, shrieking as wisps of shadow were pressed back, beaten into submission. The specter screeched in fury, "You think this is enough? You've merely scratched the surface." With each pulse of the amulet, bursts of light erupted from within, illuminating the chamber like 1,000 fireworks. But each moment of triumph was quickly overshadowed by a deep, unsettling dread. Could this flickering hope withstand the relentless grip of despair? Just a little more. He grunted, pushing against the darkness squeezing around his throat, tears forming at the corners of his eyes. The amulet shimmered brilliantly in response, as if alive, as radiant streams of light sliced through the shadows, spreading warmth and brilliance. It worked. Yet at the very moment light met dark, a collective gasp rang out from the group. The spectre's form contorted grotesquely, splitting apart, revealing twisted versions of Jim's fears and regrets. Each face screamed reminders of his past failures, guilt and sorrow crawled over him like venomous snakes. "Stop it!" he yelled, shaking his head violently. "No. I want to let you take me down." But the figures from his past kept clawing at him, wails of despair echoing, wrapping around his heart like chains. "Jim!" Marcus shouted, his own desperation lacerating the air. "You have to believe in yourself. Don't let them win." Suddenly, images of happier times flooded Jim's thoughts, dimming the anguished faces. Petey, laughing. Sarah, cheering him on. The sparkle in Mrs. Keller's eye when they solved a problem together. In that electric moment, he realized something profound. The darkness might show him his fears, but it would never take away the depth of his love. He clenched the amulet tighter, drawing every ounce of hope he could muster. "I believe," he screamed, pouring his love and light into every shadowy corner around him. The shadows surged, howling like banshees, but the brilliance of the amulet grew, wrapping around Jim like a protective embrace. Yet just as victory seemed within reach, the spectre recoiled, merging back into the darkness, laughing a cold, chilling laugh that echoed endlessly. "You think this is the end? Just wait. The real darkness is yet to come." With one final pulse, the amulet blazed, but the shadows slipped through his fingers like sand. Jim's heart dropped. This wasn't over. Gritting his teeth, he felt the weight of the battle pressing down. What other horrors lay in wait, hidden just beyond the veil? What terrible truths remained in the darkness once they left this cursed place? As he turned to his friends, fear coiling in his stomach, he knew they had only just begun to fight the real fight. Jim awoke again, gasping for breath as the sensations of fear and desperation still clung to him like smoke. The light from the amulet flickered above them, illuminating the warped office landscape that surrounded them, but now, it had a stranger energy and intensity, a determination shared among all of them. They weren't just survivors, they were a unified front against the darkness. "Get up!" Jim urged, his voice steady, summoning strength from deep within. He turned to look at Mrs. Keller, Marcus, and Sarah. "We pushed it back, but we need to keep moving. It could strike again any moment." The fear was still present, but it was overshadowed by a fierce resolve. The echoes of their past dared to taunt them, snaking their way into thoughts, spreading doubt as fire spreads through dry leaves. But as they rose, a new light flickered in Jim's heart. This wasn't about just him, but everyone fighting together. "Take my hand," he shouted, extending his arm to the group. One by one, they clasped hands, forming a barrier of unity against the approaching shadows. "What's the plan?" Marcus panted, urgency coloring his voice. The shadows shifted ominously around them, threatening to engulf them once more. "We embrace the light," Jim declared, his stomach nodding with determination. "We draw strength from each other's fears and fight back. The amulet is power, yes, but our shared hope is what truly touches the darkness." He felt their collective heartbeat, each pulse resonating like a drum against the encroaching shadows. As they moved forward, the darkness shifted, swirling violently, gathering into a solid, grotesque shape, a monstrous form rushing towards them, teeth glimmering like shards of glass. Its voice was a malicious whisper, "You think you can escape? You think you will leave this place?" But there was no room for fear now. With hands clasped tight, Jim shouted, "Our courage burns brighter than your shadows." Jim pulled everyone closer, focusing on the warmth of their connection as they ventured into the heart of the darkness. The shadows rippled angrily, flaring like wild monsters trying to escape the inevitable light. Now! Jim cried, and they raised the amulet together, pouring all their fears into the light within. Together. As the amulet blazed violently, it sent forth radiant beams, lighting up the darkness and forcing the figure to recoil. The shadows hissed, snarling, searching for a vulnerable point. But their light kept pushing back, fueled by the love and determination binding them. "Remember who we are," Mrs. Keller shouted, her voice slicing through the din of despair. "Remember how we faced our fears." Each word threw light like a bomb throughout the chamber, pushing against the creeping shadows threatening to pull them apart. The entity screamed, echoing with pain and fury, "You cannot hope to conquer me. I am your darkest nightmares. It's not just about you anymore." Jim retorted, voice rising above the chaos, eyes fierce with determination. "We are more than the sum of our fears, more than this darkness." Suddenly, his memories surged. P.D.'s laughter, Sarah's unwavering spirit, and the unity they shared against the world's harshness flashed vividly in his mind. They were all fighting for each other now, a bond stronger than fear itself. With a final surge of power fueled by their shared hope, Jim pushed the amulet forward, unleashing the light with all his might. The glow burst forth, unyielding and blinding, sending shockwaves through the dark figure. The entity screeched, shards of shadow breaking apart, collapsing under the sheer force of their courage. Light flooded the space, filling every crevice, every shadow, until the darkness began to dissipate, retreating, curling back like a wounded beast that in one final anguished roar. The specter of darkness split apart, shattered into thousands of pieces floating away like ash in the wind. A silence settled like dew in the aftermath, crisp and fresh. Jim looked around, his friends still stood by him, their expressions a mix of disbelief and elation. We did it," Sarah whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. Jim nodded, his heart swelling with relief and warmth. "We faced it together. It can't control us anymore." As they took a collective breath of victory, the shadows that had harassed them faded into nothing, leaving behind nothing but echoes. They looked around the distorted office, now lit with a strange kind of warmth as if it had finally exhaled the darkness that had suffocated it for so long. "Let us go home," Jim said, glancing at the amulet still glowing softly in his hand. "We deserve that much." And with that, they stepped toward the exit, hearts still heavy, but now also buoyed by a lightness they thought they had lost forever. Their journey had tested them, but in facing the darkness together, they redefined what it meant to be courageous. With that, they walked away from the office, the door creaking softly as it closed behind them, sealing away the shadows forever. Now that you've reached the end of this thrilling journey, make sure you don't miss out on the next exclusive story. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you always stay updated. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us grow. We want to hear from you in the comments. Flood the section with your reactions, thoughts, and the theories you have about what happened. And don't wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how this epic conclusion unfolded. Support the channel, only true fans understand the importance of every action.